So in today's video, I'm going to show you another easy method for turning photos into these kind of rough and vibrant urban sketches using Procreate. You can follow this method with any brushes you want, but I'll list mine in the description below. And the first thing we need is some kind of photo, and I didn't have any good ones, so I just pulled this from Pinterest. And we're going to start by just lowering the transparency of the photo, then making a blank layer above it. And we're just going to loosely go in there and sketch out all the major elements. Now, this sketch isn't going to be in the final illustration. This is just going to help us with the proportions and also the perspective, so there's no need to go into a lot of detail with this. Next, I'll switch off the original photo. I don't need it anymore. I'm just going to keep it though as a reference just on my phone and have this off to the side. And then to actually start painting this scene, I'm going to lower the transparency of the sketch just so it's barely visible. And then I'll work on a blank layer down here, below the sketch and below the paper texture. And we're going to start by basically making a colored outline of all the major elements. And I'm going to do that with the default Procreate brush. It's in the calligraphy category here. It's called the shell brush. And I'm basically just going to use this to go in there and create a colored outline for each of the elements in the sketch. And all the colors of these lines here are just sort of inspired from the original photo. It's important that the lines have some kind of color and they're not just like pure black or anything. But they don't have to exactly match the photo. And in some cases, the colors from the photo are pretty gray and bland. So in that situation, I might choose a slightly brighter, more imaginative color. And there we go. I think these outlines look really nice. Now, before I move on, I want to point out a couple of tricks that I did with the outlines that you might have missed. So the first one is, you're going to have a lot of overlapping elements. So usually what I'll do is I'll just clear out the area first and then draw the outline like that. And that's how I made them overlap nicely. It doesn't look right if there's like a transparency. So if I didn't erase it and I just left the lines, they would be going through the plants. And this is going to be a problem that'll get worse in later steps. So try to avoid overlapping shapes that have like a transparent effect. The other thing is, like in this area, in the original photo, it's wildly complicated and I don't like it. So basically what I did is I just made the outline like very symbolic, and I just stuck a table and a chair and some cups just to give the vibe like from the photo without having to get lost in all that impossible detail. And you can see I did a similar thing here with the bicycle as well. How it interacts with the railing and stuff doesn't really make sense in reality, but I just kind of messed around with it. And I discovered that this way gets the point across because the railing is important, but it doesn't obscure the bike, and I think it's good enough. And with the outline finished, we can move on and add the background wash. So first, I'll switch off the sketch. I don't need it anymore. I'll make a new layer, but I'm going to place it below the outline. And I'll just fill in all the major colors for the background elements, just using the smooth, dry round brush. And fortunately for this scene, it's pretty quick. There's not a lot of crazy colors going on. Now, when it comes to doing the background washes, I recommend having these closer to the true colors from the photo. With the outlines, we could get pretty creative, but I think the background washes look better if they're more kind of normal. And if you're following along with a photo of your own, it's totally normal to feel like kind of everything is falling apart at this point. This is one of those workflows that really comes together in the last few steps. So if you're halfway through and you're feeling a little bit discouraged, just really trust the process and try to finish it all the way to the end, because I guarantee you're going to be blown away with the result. And there we go. I think these background washes look pretty nice. Next, I'm going to move on and do some shading. And it's pretty simple. I'll just make a layer that's above the wash, but still below the outlines. And I'll use an indigo color like this, and then the water stain glazing brush. And I'll add a bunch of simple, hard shadows like this. And usually right off the bat, these shadows are a little bit too strong. So I'm going to adjust it. But first, I'll set the transparency mode to multiply, and then I'll lower it to 0. And then I'll just slowly raise it back up just until they're barely visible. After that, I'll switch over to a water blender. And I'll use this wherever I see any kind of weird, kind of digital looking overlapping strokes. And once this kind of initial shading is finished, I recommend doing another layer that has some texture to it. So to do that, I'll make another layer and I'll set it to multiply. And this time, I'm going to use the colored pencil brush, and I'll just go in there over most of the shadows and add this kind of cross-hatching texture. And just like I did with the shadows before, I'll adjust the transparency to make the effect a little bit more subtle. And at this point, with the outlines, the background washes, and the shading finished, I like to go back a few steps and adjust the outlines just to introduce a few more kind of creative colors. Now this is an optional thing and you don't have to do it, but I think it adds a really nice effect. So here's the outline layer. I want to make sure that one is selected. And basically I'm just going to use the freehand selection tool just to isolate certain areas of the outline. I'll feather these out just a little bit, just to make the edges a little bit softer. And then I'll adjust them using the hue, saturation, and brightness. Now this does take a little bit of time, and I like to adjust kind of each area of outlines just separately, but I'm just going to play around with the hue and the saturation and even the brightness and try to find a more creative color combination. Next, I'm going to move on and start finishing this up by adding some remaining details, and I'm going to make these on their own blank layer above everything, even above the outlines. And I'm just going to use that same shale brush we used in the first place, and I'll just quickly scratch in all the remaining details that I forgot so far. And these details are mostly from the original photo, but a lot of them are just from my imagination as well. And as a final kind of finishing touch, I recommend adding some kind of lettering at the top or the bottom. Now for me, I'm not really good at lettering, so I didn't do this exactly by hand. I just used built-in fonts in Procreate and the text tool, and I just typed it out. Then I lowered the transparency of that and just went over the top of it with the shale brush. And just like that, this rough and vibrant urban sketch is finished. And here's the result printed out with my Canon Pixma. And it's a really cheap printer. I bought mine brand new with ink for just $50, and I'll link a video explaining my printing process at the end of this one. And that pretty much wraps it up. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. I really love to see that. Give this video a like if you think I've earned it. And here's a printing tutorial and another urban sketching tutorial that I think you'll love to watch next.